Chapter 12. Captivity Day 18 saw Mari. Electricity shot through her body. She could feel a hand resting against her stomach. Her mouth was being held open. She could feel lips against her face, and small hands pushing against her chest rhythmically. Mari's chest felt sore as her heart began beating, weakly at first, but slowly growing stronger. She inhaled deeply. She felt hair trace across her face as the other person's mouth pulled away from her own. "I feel a heartbeat," Eris said excitedly. "Oleander," Cyanide said, "just hold that anchor stone in place until we're sure we're not going to lose her again." Her eyes fluttered open. Cyanide was standing by her right shoulder, looking down at her face. Eris was standing on her left, holding her hands up and watching Sam's chest. Oleander was next to her right hip, with his hand holding the stone against her navel. "What happened?" Mari wondered. "Kivaza told me I was dead." Cyan glared at Eris. Their hand movements made it clear they were having a telepathic conversation. The harder Mari tried to move, the heavier her limbs felt. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. "I need a minute," Cyanide snarled as she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Eris pulled a stool out from under the platform and sat down. "Wait, there are stools under here," Oleander said. "If you weren't so busy trying to develop X-ray vision, you might have noticed them," Eris jeered. "Just pull it out using telekinetic arm." "Oh, wait, you can't do that. I guess you're just going to have to keep standing there. It's pretty far under there and you can't move your hand, unless you want to risk losing her again." "I do just fine without access to psionics," Oleander snickered. Eris grinned. Sam heard the stool sliding across the floor beneath the table. The table didn't move. "Earth awareness and what?" Eris asked. "Magnetic force," Oleander shrugged. "The metal in the casters is ferrous." "Good catch," Eris said playfully. "I do enjoy when men get creative." Mari tried to speak, but only managed to groan. She felt tired, weak, and annoyed by their antics. "What?" Oleander asked. "You just sit there and look pretty while us women talk," Eris teased. "Don't talk. Think." Eris spoke into Sam's mind. "I'll listen. What happened to me?" Sam thought. "We lost you," Eris thought back. "I know I died, but," Sam started to think, but her thoughts were interrupted. Eris shook her head and spoke directly into Mari's mind. "A body without a soul is just an empty vessel. Without proper measures in place, everything just stops. Once that life force is gone, the body will die without intervention. It was supposed to be a simple soul transfer and binding ritual, but when the last stone was put in place, we lost you." "What does that mean?" Sam wondered. How to explain this, Eris thought to her. "I was wearing a soul catcher when I was killed, so it wasn't a true death. I don't know how much of this is true. Until today I thought it was just legend and tradition. We believe all that's left of a person after true death are the memories of the people that knew them, touched them, loved or hated them. It's said those memories live on in a place we call the realm of dreams. When I said we lost you, I wasn't talking about your body. All of the life force that would normally be thought of as you was there one moment, gone the next." Eris shivered noticeably. Cyanide is one scary lady. Without missing a beat, she switched from transferring your soul to, well, something I haven't done since I was in double digits. There are different realities adjacent to this one. We call them realms. The steps to preforming a summoning ritual are preparing the circle, creating an anchor point, opening a rift, then selecting and calling through whatever you're summoning. What happened today was, she called you back, that's all that matters. I'm never going to work with her again. We got lucky this time, but opening a rift to a realm that we know almost nothing about, without preparation. You're not the only one who was lucky to survive. He doesn't know what really happened here today. Let's keep it that way. Is that why you two were arguing? Sam thought. Eris smirked. You said you talked to Kivaza while you were in the realm of dreams. Why do you think she's upset? Kivaza called me a dreamwalker, Samari thought forcefully. I was thrown into her dream. I had to chase a little white fluff ball to get back. I better go tell the executioner what she just told me, Eris sighed and added, I'll see if I can get something to make Samari more comfortable on the way back. Lying flat on her back, Samari couldn't see too far without straining her neck. Her Samsaran body had a high pain threshold, but her entire body still ached, her chest most of all. She smiled to herself, amused by her own thoughts. Her experience in Kivaza's dream had helped her find an unexpected clarity. People let themselves be defined by names, titles, bloodlines, but these were just conveniences. Who you really are was presumed by others based on these trivialities, and only truly known by the inner self. The real answer to who she was independent of names, positions, or even the shell in which she inhabited. It was a question that could only really be answered by a lifetime of experiences, each of which alters the answer in minute, yet intricate ways. From the moment she'd awakened, Sam had focused on defining herself by who she had been, without pausing to consider that the person within was in constant state of becoming. One thing was certain, she felt a stronger connection to the heritage of her own existence now. Samari looked forward to starting the process of becoming. What she would become, only time would tell. Reconnecting with Kivaza was like sliding a key into a lock. Samari wasn't ready to turn it yet, not until reclaiming that part of herself she was missing. Sam could hear noise coming from the other side of the room. Did she say when I'll be able to move my hand? If she's not moving around on her own by now, Eris grumbled, we're going to have to figure out what went wrong. Help me prop her up, so we can find the problem, Eris said. When I woke up, all of you were touching me, Sam thought excitedly. Does that mean it's safe to touch me now? It's fine, Eris thought to her. Working together, they managed to prop up Samari using cushions taken from the chairs in the next room. Sam wasn't quite sitting up, but it was a definite improvement. She was a bit more comfortable and could see both of them better. Oleander pressed down firmly to make sure the stone didn't move from its resting place. The tips of his fingers were unusually warm. A tingling sensation seemed to be flowing from the fragment through her belly button. It almost tickled. Sam didn't know whether or not it was safe, but he was using soul touch. It felt a little different, but Samari was sure that's what she was feeling. Are you comfortable? Eris asked. Is that normal? Samari wondered. I'm sorry, Eris chuckled softly. Is what normal? While you were helping get me comfy, it felt different. Is what normal? Oleander asked. Samari glared at Oleander. You interrupted her answer, Eris scolded. Just hang on. He's using soul touch on my stomach, and you were using yours on my shoulders when you were moving me. I'm just trying to understand this. I know what a lamentic woman's touch is supposed to feel like. His feels different. When you were both touching me, it was. Sam paused, trying to come up with the right way to explain it. His fingers feel normal, but where his palm is it tingles. The tingle felt like it was reaching for your hand. Eris looked over at Oleander with a mischievous grin. What's that look for? Oleander smiled. Are you two plotting something? Something interesting, I hope. Eris grinned. Oleander, we need your help with an experiment. What kind of experiment? Oleander asked warily. What are you volunteering me for? Sam thought apprehensively. Being touched all over, Eris thought back while fidgeting with the clasp of Sam's leather top. Eris turned her attention to Oleander. It involves soul touch. He looked Sam in the eyes and said, "You understand it works better with direct skin contact." Sam blushed and nodded. Eris put her free hand on top of his. "Don't even think about moving your hand off that rock. This really isn't a scheme. I think there was a problem with the last stone." "Really?" Oleander said with a raised brow. "I'm small in size, not experience," Eris scoffed. "Don't forget, the executioner allowed you to help so you'd feel useful. She needed me to assist. That should tell you something. If I dyed my hair, you wouldn't be mistaking me for a child. I'm certainly not built like one." Oleander opened his mouth to speak, but Eris wasn't done yet. "The role of the needle is vital. I'm out of practice." She was feeding the spiritual thread faster than I've dealt with before, so I might have missed a stitch. "You've never done this before, so it may have screwed something up. Or the stone might be the issue," Eris said. "This is one of those rare problems that can be enjoyable to fix. It has to be done. Do you want to make it a chore, or enjoy it with us?" "I've never heard of a lamentic dyeing their hair," Sam thought. "It doesn't take, usually," Eris thought back. "If it did, I'd have mine done. Then I'd look like a short Terran. With lamentics being known for being over 6 feet, everyone assumes I'm a child. He needs to get over that." "Okay, what do you need me to do?" Oleander asked. "Maintain soul touch, and keep your right hand where it is. She said your fingertips feel normal, but there's a tingle by your palm," Eris said as she unfastened the clasps on Sam's top. "From what she told me, I think I know what's happening." "It's not supposed to." Oleander stopped talking as Eris exposed Sam's breasts. Eris hopped up onto the altar and sat next to Samari, facing toward her head. "Try to ignore anything you feel by his hand for now." Sam nodded. "We may call it soul touch," Eris said as she carefully guided Sam's left arm out of her sleeve, "but on a functional level it allows our life force to interact with someone else's. With a little practice, you can tell when the person you're touching is lying. There's a little more to it, but that's all you need to know right now." Sam glanced down at Eris's hands with confusion. "Mine isn't active right now," Eris smiled while holding Sam's wrist in both hands. "Is that tingle responding to normal touch?" Sam shook her head. "Good," Eris smiled. "It should just feel like penetrating warmth, like his fingertips. When I activate mine, you should feel it flowing through your wrist. I'll start with just one hand then both." Warmth flowed into Sam's wrist from Eris's right hand. She thought it was flowing from one hand to the other until Eris started using both hands. The area from where both hands met was more distinct. "I can feel it," Samari thought. "The tingle from his hand is only spreading a little, but not far." Eris held Sam's wrist and started tracing the fingers of her other hand down Samari's arm. The warmth should feel like it's flowing from one hand to the other as long as they started close. It's like directing energy currents. If I stop making contact, it interrupts the current. Eris raised her fingers, reached up, and rested her hand on Sam's shoulder. The warmth from both hands was flowing through her skin, but was unconnected and didn't seem to be attempting to do so. Sam nodded to confirm she felt it and understood. Should I get him more involved? Eris thought while grinning broadly. Samari nodded enthusiastically. Eris pouted playfully and spoke into her mind, "I hope that doesn't mean you want me to stop touching you. I haven't even gotten to the good parts yet." Sam blushed meekly and shook her head. "Oleander," Eris teased, "I hope you're taking notes. You'll be quizzed later." He sighed irritably. "Breast," Eris said abruptly. "What?" That got his attention, Sam thought whimsically. Pick a breast and hold it with your free hand, Eris instructed. Hers or yours, he asked. Well, if you want me to decide. Eris giggled as she played with her dress strap. Oleander smirked as he rested his hand on Sam's right breast. The warmth of his touch was consistent with her experience with soul touch. The tingling sensation seemed to shift slightly toward his other hand. Eris studied Sam's expression before speaking, then placed her right hand near Oleander's with a narrow gap between them. The feeling between the flow from his touch should be separate right now. Sam nodded. Eris leaned forward and crooked a finger at Oleander. What do you want? Oleander said while glancing back and forth between the two women. Showing her what happens when we complete the circuit, Eris said breathily. What are you? Shut up and kiss me, Eris said with a twinkle in her eyes and a playful smile on her lips. Oleander looked at Sam as if he was seeking approval. Samari opened her mouth and tried to speak and began to cough. I think he's worried you won't want him if I play with him, too, Eris's voice snickered within Samari's mind. Sam smiled and shrugged. Eris smiled down at Sam. I'd rather kiss you, but the person without soul touch acts like a ground. If I touch him, you'll conduct the current between him and me. Eris repositioned her hand so Samari's nipple was between her hand and Oleander's. Sam, Eris said with a devious grin, as she motioned Oleander to move closer, pay attention to how the flow changes. As Oleander and Eris both leaned forward, his hair moved slightly. Whispering wind. Eris continued forward and rubbed her cheek against his. As the two Lamentics' faces touched, Sam could feel the warmth flowing across the surface of her breast between their hands. Neither of them was actually touching her nipple, but the sensation was there. Eris rested her left hand on Sam's hip as she angled her head upward and whispered something in his ear. The feeling widened as Eris continued to talk. That's the difference arousal makes, Eris thought to her. The tingling feeling from Sam's navel seemed to be stretching and contorting in response to their touch. One of Eris' hands glided down from her breast to her stomach as the hand on her hip traced inward. The tingling sensation seemed to rotate within her, and the warmth flowing between the woman's hands spread and shifted. Watching them interacting, it was striking just how white Eris' skin and hair were compared to his. Lamentics as a species had almost no pigmentation, but Eris looked like she was sculpted from snow. Eris pulled away from him and turned her head to look down at Sam, severing the connection between the two Lamentics. The broadened expanse of warmth permeating Samari's body retreated to the positioning of their hands. What was that? Oleander said as he removed his left hand from Samari's breast and stared at his palm. Describe it, Eris said. A twinge, he shrugged. Where? My right hand. Well, that was helpful, Eris smirked. Sam, did you feel anything? Sam considered for a moment then thought, it's like something tied to my belly button is all tangled. Does that make sense? More useful than a twinge in a hand, Eris thought back. Eris scooted down until she was sitting next to Sam's knees. This is going to be fun, the woman said sarcastically. It's just unraveling a knot that I can't look at, that has no ends, that I can't cut, and have to puzzle out my progress by interpreting what you two say you're feeling. I'm not sure how to approach this. If I could feel it myself, that would at least be something. Eris rested her hand on top of Oleander's right hand. Sam, I'll need your feedback, so I'll be monitoring your thoughts. Oleander, just caress her with your free hand while I concentrate and see if I can feel those threads moving. Samari smiled and blushed. Eris lowered her head, closed her eyes, and lightly traced back and forth across Sam's stomach with the tips of her fingers as Oleander caressed Samari's body. Each time he interrupted the flow of soul touch between both of his hands, Eris scolded him and moved her hand to re-establish the connection. Their touch felt pleasant and soothing, without actually seeming sexual. Sam was quick to let Eris know whenever she felt a tugging sensation. After a while, Samari was able to anticipate the subtle changes in the energy flowing through her body. There were spots that felt a bit odd, beyond the tingling knot within her gut. While training with cyanide, she was able to get used to her new body, but all her reflexes seemed sluggish. She felt more connected with her former self now, having been in that dreamscape. The person she had once been, Kayla, had relied more heavily on Kobitonj and psionics. She had access to mystrionics, but relied more heavily on the other two. The original Samari had focused almost entirely on the environmental and healing disciplines of mystrionics. Kayla's training was offensive, whereas Samari was defensive. It was only natural there would be a dramatic difference in their muscle memory. This little exercise was helping her understand herself in ways she hadn't anticipated. Sam felt an uncomfortable tug, and from the look on her face, Eris felt it, too. Eris, Samari thought meekly, my last body had psionics. I don't know how to channel energy without it. If you can show me how, I'd like to help. Hey, Oleander, Eris said, rest your left hand just below her neckline for a second. She asked me a question I can't answer. Did you undergo formal training? Of course, Oleander said, while moving his hand as directed. I'm House Orwell, as well as Adam. Where were you trained? Eris asked. I was trained in Kobitonj on one of the dojos on Aspis, before they were shut down, and received classical black church training at a temple in the Ojer system, Oleander replied. What about you? Sam knew Kayla had been raised by two mothers, one who was trained at Aspis, the other had broken with the Black Church years earlier after undergoing pyromancy specialization training, which had been only passed down in a limited capacity. The original Samari's mystrionic training had been overseen by the Lamentic she served with, Hakia. Only Eris was able to overhear her internal monologue. Hopefully, Oleander could provide some insight. You're locked out from psionic use. So, you can't utilize energy channeling. What do you use for knack targeting? Eris asked. Oleander smirked. I asked where you were trained. I'm not permitted to talk about the house I was born into, Eris scolded, so I can't discuss where I was trained, or what I use instead of mystrionics. Oleander smiled appreciatively. Simple process of elimination would provide the answer. Understood. You're looking for the mystrionics overlap then. The term used by all three knacks is a variation of the word redirect. You just had to push it as far as you could, Eris said while rolling her eyes. I like to think of it as caressing the reply, Oleander teased. Of course, you do, Eris giggled. Sam wheezed painfully, unable to laugh. Okay, Sam, visualize a mirror. Eris began. That's reflect, Oleander corrected, wrong knack, wrong power. Is it? Eris frowned. While the two of them argued back and forth about terms and techniques, Samari closed her eyes and focused on her inner self. She could feel her heartbeat pushing blood through her veins and the warmth of their hands. Samari tensed and released individual muscle groups, one after the next. The knot in her gut didn't seem to be affected much by her pulse, respiration, or muscle contractions, but it was there. She could almost feel it. Sam winced in pain as she wiggled her hips. The tugging sensation seemed to be more affected by the positioning of Eris's fingers than anything Sam was doing. I think I found it, Sam thought. When I returned to House Rajuk territory, Eris complained, I have decades of penitent servitude left to look forward to. Eris? Sam thought. At least this has given you some time away, Oleander said. Are you still listening? Sam thought more forcefully. Running into that shadow entity was serendipitous. I wish the little smudge stuck around longer. Eris continued, once Lady Cyanide has no further need for me, I'll be sent back, but if I take too much time, I'll get in trouble. Eris. Sam thought with all the force she could manage. Is something wrong, Samari? Eris asked. I think I found it, Sam thought irritably. Really, why didn't you just say so? Eris asked. Sam glared at Eris. I think it's really far under the rock, Sam thought. Put your fingers on either side of his middle finger. It stayed completely still when I was moving my hips. Oleander, relax both your hands, Eris said firmly. Let me know if you feel anything unexpected, and exactly where you feel it. Samari watched Eris slide her slender fingers between his, so their tips were touching the stone under Oleander's hand. It seemed to be glowing more brightly than it had prior to the ritual. Okay, Eris said, move those hips, and let's see what happens. Sam whimpered softly as she slowly shifted her hips from side to side. It was agonizing. She could feel the threads pulling against Eris's fingers as Oleander's middle finger shifted in tandem with her movements. I feel it by the heel of my palm, and just below that finger, Oleander said. Eris put her other hand behind Oleander's wrist and instructed Sam to move her hip again. His entire hand shifted this time. Well, Eris said with a quirky little smile, I know what went wrong. Correcting this is going to be interesting. Oleander, keep your left hand on her chest so it doesn't pull too much. As for your right, I'm going to need you to rotate your hand so your fingers are pointing toward her feet instead of her head. Try turning it to the right then left. One will hurt her, the other won't. Just watch her expression. Eris withdrew both of her hands and knelt on the altar next to Samari's knees while Oleander adjusted his hand position. Turning it to the right loosened up the tension. It may not be sewing with literal thread, Eris spoke into Sam's head, but in principle, it's the same. I didn't pull one strand tight enough, and it got wrapped around the stone. That threw off the alignment of the next stitch. Sam nodded. Eris slung her left knee over Samari's legs with Oleander's fingers pinned under her thighs and the woman's feet braced against Sam's legs. This must be the interesting part, he teased. Eris looked at Sam and smirked as she pushed her skirt behind her with the clear intent of ensuring everyone would be able to see what was going on beneath it. She separated out his fingers, keeping his other fingers pinned straight beneath her, as she carefully bent his middle finger. She massaged the invisible strand away from his hand, down his bent finger, and over the knuckle. The tightness in Samari's throat and chest eased as the thread loosened. Cute panties, Sam snickered, as Oleander struggled desperately not to look. He was in the least awkward position of the three of them, but looked like he was in the most discomfort. If he interrupted Eris's concentration, she was likely to break his finger as punishment. The heaviness and ache in Samari's limbs increased as she stretched the final cord over the stone. It took a few attempts, but once it was free, Sam was able to move freely again. Okay, get off me, Sam said as she shoved Oleander's arm away from her chest and squirmed out from beneath them. Eris hopped down as Oleander backed away from the side. Please, nobody touch me for a while, Sam said as she rushed to the exit. Do you want to? Oleander began to speak but was silenced as Sam swiftly opened and shut the door behind herself. Their touch had started welcome, even comforting at times, but by the time her issue was resolved, she was feeling confined and claustrophobic. She stood panting, leaning against the doorway, trying to regain her composure. The feeling of being trapped within her own body had flooded through her just as her life force had flooded back into her body. She felt like she owed them an apology, but right now she just wanted to be left alone. Feeling better? Cyan asked from the doorway to the office. I think so, Sam said sheepishly as she moseyed past the chairs. Good, Cyan said. I need to bring everyone back where they belong. Eris needs to get started home. I have to drop Oleander back off at the meeting hall, and I should bring you back to the facility. Aisha will be sending Alice to check in on you sometime tomorrow, and Delila will need to run you through another neurological exam. You have a few busy days in front of you. Isn't there anything else we can do? Mari said over the sound of quiet giggling from the other side of the door to the ritual room. Cyan smirked. Please? Sam said nervously. After all that, I really don't want to be touched, but they're both. It just doesn't seem right. He can visit me some other time. She doesn't have that option. I really should. Cyanide began. Can't the two of us just go for a walk? Maybe find somewhere to talk for a while? I have a lot to unpack. I need your help making sense of it all, Sam pouted. Cyan inhaled deeply and breathed out a heavy sigh. Is that a yes? Mari asked eagerly. Come on. Let's go, Cyan grumbled as she turned around and led her out of the room.